Okay, so the first thing we'll do is take a look at the JLog itself. This is the JLog 2.6. Comes in just a small box from R2 Prototyping. Inside the box, you'll find actually really simple. You're going to find the JLog itself. It's just a very tiny unit. You're going to see several pins. What those are both inputs and outputs. You're going to see a couple micro plugs. Okay, the pins on this side are for your standard servo leads. The one below it and the ones on this side are for some micro kind of plugs. I'm not going to be using those, so I can't show you how those are connected, but I will show you how some of these are connected for my purposes. And then also right there above the plugs is a tiny micro SD slot. Okay, so that's the JLog. Micro SD card comes with 2 gigabytes, and also the micro to standard size adapter. So that's good. We will be using that whether you're going to log the data on the SD card or not. Also, different kind of adapter for USB, so in case you don't have a slot for a full-size SD card on your PC, you can put the micro SD card right there, plug it into your USB port. One of those micro cables. I don't use it for my purposes, so I can't explain or show you how that's connected. And just your standard male-to-male servo lead, which is actually kind of nice that they included it, to be honest with you. So that way you can go, in my case I use Hobbywing. I'll be showing you how to connect it to a Hobbywing ESC. So you can go from the port on the Hobbywing one end to the port in the JLog on the other end, and then you just need an output to your telemetry. And that's it. Very small, very light. I didn't weigh it yet. I can, but I mean, it's probably just a few grams. Very, very light. I wouldn't be worried about adding it to really any size heli, as long as you have the room to kind of double-sided tape somewhere on the frame. But nice compact unit. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go to the jlog.eu website and go to downloads, and you'll be brought to this screen here, but I'll give you in the description the shortcut so that you can get there. You can come right onto this page. This is going to give you a selection of ESCs and telemetry types. So in your ESCs, if you have Contronic or Castle or a Hobbywing Platinum V3 or a couple others, you're going to be able to use this page. If you have a Hobbywing Platinum V4, it's on a separate page. It has not been added to the selection of the ESCs on this download page yet. So I'll give you the link to that as well. It looks like this. And what you would do on this entire page is dedicated to the Platinum V4. What you would do is just scroll down to JLog 2.6 and then choose whichever telemetry system you're going to be using, and you download it from this page. So I'll give you a copy of this web address as well as this web address, so you can shortcut right to it. So in my instance, I'm going to use the Hobbywing Platinum V3, and I'm going to be using it with Jeti. Hit go. Gives you a nice diagram of how things can be wired up or should be wired up, and the required file. So if you click on that, you'll download the file, and the file is going to, in my case, it's going to show up in my downloads folder as a .bin file. Take that .bin file, and you're going to copy it over to your SD card, whether you use the micro SD to full-size SD adapter, or if you're using the USB adapter, whatever the case may be, you're going to want to go into your SD card, and you're going to copy over by simply dragging and dropping. You're going to copy that file right on over. Okay. So in my case, it's 26-P_E-81.13.bin. That is specifically for the firmware that is needed for, in this case, Contronic Jive. Oh, I'm sorry. It should have been for Hobbywing V3. Oh, I've got it here, yeah. Hobbywing V3 with Jeti telemetry. Okay, so now that you've got the firmware loaded on your SD card. You're going to take the SD card. In my case, I use the full-size SD card adapter, so take your micro SD card out. You're going to place it inside the JLog unit, the slot, and it's going to click in. Then you need to provide some power to it. Okay, so when connecting power to the JLog, this part's kind of critical. On a Hobbywing, you're going to have a lead, just like a normal servo lead, with a ground wire, a positive wire, and a signal wire. However, where we plug this into the JLog is in the part labeled jive. And if you look very closely on that port for jive, it goes negative, and then the red is actually your signal. The yellow is actually your positive line. So you're going to have to switch your power and your signal lines. Okay? I'm going to do that, but first, because I'm not going to be powering this for the first time with a JLog, I don't have it, or excuse me, with a Hobbywing, I don't have it in the heli yet. I'm going to do it with just a 2S LiPo, okay? But the same rule applies. The 2S LiPo would normally have red and black next to each other. Red and black is not next to each other on the port labeled jive. You're going to have to look at it really closely, not sure how much the camera's going to pick up. So what we need is a plug with 3 slots, like I've got on this LiPo. Negative has to go on one end, positive has to go on the other end. Okay, so I've already pulled the lead out of the middle slot. I'm going to move it over to the end slot. I can put it back later. So I've got my SD card in place. Jive on the JLog 2.6 is what we're looking for. Minus pin, plus pin. We're going to plug this in. The LED should come on and flash for several seconds. That red LED flashing means it's now in bootloader mode, and it's going to load the file that we have on the SD card. I wait until that LED stops flashing. I just saw a couple series of lights. It's safe to unplug the power source. I can also now remove my SD card. I'm going to take this SD card, micro SD card, put it back in the adapter, whichever one you're using, and put the adapter back in the PC, and I want to read the file that's on it. Okay, so we have uploaded the file onto the JLog by using the micro SD card. Then I removed the micro SD card, put it back in the reader, and put it back in the PC. I've now opened the SD card file, and what I want to do is look at the version. So you're going to see this version text document. Open that. What you want to do is make sure that's the correct version that you downloaded. In my case, this is correct, 26PE81.13, which is what we looked at a little while ago when we downloaded the firmware. Okay, next thing you're going to need is something called JLC or JLog configurator. You can download that from the site also. And I'm going to go ahead and open that. Okay, here's my JLog configurator. Switch to English. And now what I need to do is load the config text into the JLog configurator. So this was created, remember, this and this were not on the card when I put it into the JLog. Only the .bin file was. Okay, what it gave me back was the version type, and it's just on a notepad or a text document, so it shows the firmware version that I've installed, and then this config document. We need to get that config document loaded into the JLC or JLog converter. configurator, excuse me. So I'll hit load. Okay, it's gonna look for that file. I'm already in the correct place for it, the config file. Hit open, and it opens here in the configurator. Okay, so now there's some setup that we're going to need to do. What this does is it's going to write a line of code that we're going to then save back onto the we're going to save this back onto the SD card, and then when we load this back onto the JLog using the SD card, it's going to give it all the parameters that it needs to recognize motor RPM and anything else that we tell it. Okay. So what I need to do is configure this a little bit for my particular setup. Okay, so I have a 10-pole motor, so I'm going to need to choose 10 poles. If this specific motor that you're using is in the drop-down, you can choose it. So in my case, let's see, HK3 4025, yeah, it's actually in there. Nice. So I can choose HK3 4025 because that's the size of the motor that I'm using. But if that's not in there, then you can just select the number of poles. Okay. This actually just changed to number 10 pole selected. Now you can use either the ratio by putting in your gear ratio here, or you can click on this box here and it'll change it to selecting, okay, what pinion, what main gear do you have, right? So I have a 21 tooth pinion. This is the ratio. Why can't I go up in size? Oh, I need to increase the main gear first, apparently. The main gear I want to put in is 206. Will it allow me to type in that box? No, it won't. So I'm going to have to go all the way up to 206. Then it'll allow me to increase the pinion. Apparently, if your main gear is too small, the math won't work and it won't allow you to increase your pinion. So I had to increase my main gear to 206, which in my case takes into account for the gear reduction, a multi-stage gear reduction, and a 21 tooth pinion. And right now I'm not going to worry about alarms because I'm using a Jeti. The Jeti's got its own alarms on it. I'm maybe mess around with this later, but I'm not going to play with it now. Looks like some opto. Okay, if you're going to use the opto sensor, which I do have, but I'm not going to use that yet. Right now, all I'm looking for out of this is RPM, basically, head speed. So let's hit save. It's going to open the same file named config. It's going to rewrite that file. We don't want to change the name. It's fine, leave it alone. It's going to ask you if you want to replace it. Yes. And that's it. The next thing we need to do is just delete the files that we don't need, which is going to be everything on your SD card except for the newly written config file. Even the firmware comes off, because if you leave this on and you put this back in the JLog, it's going to try to rewrite the firmware. So that part's already done. So all it needs is the newly created text document, config text, that we just wrote. Now, the next time we power up the JLog with this SD card in, it's going to read the new parameters, it's going to rewrite what it's learned before. Then when we take the SD card out and use the JLog, it's going to work off of those parameters. So it doesn't need this the SD card in there going forward after that point. So now that this is the only thing left, I'm going to eject my SD card and put it back in the JLog. Okay, so back over at the JLog, we're going to take our adapter, get the micro SD card out, place it back in the slot on the JLog. It should click into place. There we go. Now this has the config file on it. I'm going to power it up again. Remember, just be very careful of the power and ground pins. It should look like this. This set of pins. Ground all the way to the left. Power moved over one spot. It should now write that file onto the JLog. Okay, now it's actually active right now, but because I'm not hooked up anything, I'm just using a 2S receiver pack. I'm going to go ahead and unhook it, and I'm going to remove the SD card. That file should now be written. The file that was on the SD card should now be written to the JLog, and it won't need that SD card in it anymore. Okay. Now, if you're going to use your JLog for not only telemetry but also saving the data, logging it, then you're going to need the SD card in the slot. But that requires unlocking to the full version, and I have Jeti, which has logging capabilities right in the transmitter anyway, so I'm not going to be using the card anymore. Okay, next steps will be to install this in the heli and get it wired up to your receiver and to your ESC. Okay, so now we're ready to make some connections. This is just going to be temporary setup for me because I already have MUI sensor on this particular model that I use, but this is just for demonstration right now and to make sure that the firmware correctly installed and whatnot. So I'm running a Hobbywing V3 on this particular model, so I've already connected the wire to the Hobbywing port. Just remember what you've got to do before you connect this to the JLog. Very important that you switch those couple of wires, okay? Switch your signal and your power wire. So the end result should be power is to the outside, signal in the middle, ground to the outside. Okay? Next thing I did was connected into my receiver. In this case, I'm using Jeti telemetry, so I've got a Jeti receiver with telemetry on it into the EXT port. Again, this is just temporary, so this wire is actually the one that's should be connected coming from my MUI sensor, but for this demonstration, this is what's going to go to my JLog. Okay. Now the important step with this is the JLog does not accept power through the port that we're about to plug this into. So when it comes to Jeti, you have to remove or cut the power lead. You should only have signal and ground. Just those two leads. They're in their stock location, but you have to remove or otherwise inhibit, cut, whatever you got to do the power, because Jeti won't accept the JLog, excuse me, won't accept power in the port that we're going to plug this end into. So now take your JLog. Remember, we removed the SD card. No reason for it. I'm not logging in this JLog. That was just for setup purposes. Go to the Jive port. Plug in the lead that's coming from the Hobbywing. Being very careful of the orientation. So it goes ground to the left. Middle is your signal. Power to the right. The colors can be confusing, but look at the symbols. Okay. Then the COM port that's right above it is going to be the output to, in this case, the Jeti receiver. And it goes negative all the way to the left, signal all the way to the right, and no power. Just the ground and the signal. Okay. Lastly, grab my transmitter, power it up, Okay, and power up the heli, and if you notice on the JLog, it's going to blink. The green light is going to blink. Okay, my normal boot up sequence went through. The green light came on, has since gone off, but if I go into my transmitter now and check in menu, sensors, displayed telemetry, I've actually added an RPM. If you go into add, if you know anything about Jeti, you'll go into add and you should see all of your new telemetry parameters in your radio. I've added that to my home page. So if I go look at it, I can see JLog 2.6 RPM and 0 RPM because we're not moving. As soon as I start spooling up the heli, it should display my RPM there. And that's it for your connections. Find a nice location. Again, the weight is very, very minimal on this unit. So anywhere that you have spare space, you're going to mount this. Again, for me, this is very temporary, so I'm going to find a place just inside the frames, tuck away the wiring, get a couple of good readings on it, adjust my head speed, and then take this back out and permanently install it in one of my models that does not currently have any telemetry, but is running a Hobbywing V4. Okay.